Dear friends, welcome to ePathshala. I am Dr. Vishal Jadhav, Department of Sociology, Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapeeth, Pune. Today we are going to look at a module titled Non-Party Political Fronts and Grassroots Alternatives, which is part of the Political Sociology paper. In the previous module, we had seen how there was some kind of resentment to electoral politics. The question continues in this module. What happens when in a democracy like India, electoral politics or party politics does not answer key questions of subaltern groups? What if it does not provide the space that is required for the emancipation of the marginalized communities, such as the tribals, such as the minorities, such as women? In such cases, as this module will argue, a new kind of non-party political formations take their place. Context of emergence of non-party political fronts. D.L. Sheth in 2004 points out that most of these groups were born during the national freedom struggle, particularly Gandhian socialist, communist and social reform movements. These had been diffused post-independence due to the imposition of the liberal, modernist or the Nehruvian ruling elite. Gradually they broke away from their respective parties as autonomous activists and continued working on the margins of electoral politics. Sheth adds that they were reinvigorated particularly due to Jayaprakash Narayan's movement for intensifying participatory democracy, challenging elite political rule and reviving Lok Shakti or people's power in democracy. Rajni Kothari too outlines the circumstances that were responsible for the rise of these groups. Withdrawal of the state. Encouraged by the dominant elite not keen on a distributive and mass-oriented state role, the state has minimized its interventions over the years. They instead urged the state to act as an agent for ushering in technological modernization. Repressive state. The state had become more repressive, lashing out vengefully at any critical local movement. The situation stemmed due to the sluggish economic growth and volatile political environment. Kothari states that the dominant elite had been reluctant to allow redistributive schemes, thus exacerbating the tensions between and among the masses. The state had also become besieged by agents who are relying on the military, police and local mafias and goons to maintain control. Rise of local power holders. The government was also being undermined by the emergence of local landlords and hegemonical castes in rural areas. Villages and tribal regions were increasingly witnessing the seeping of commercial interests, emergence of contractors, illegal alcohol and gambling dens protected by local bureaucrats, politicians and police. Emergence of communal forces. Fourthly, due to the gaps in the government's authority, fascist and fundamentalist forces were surfacing on the horizon. Kothari argues that organizations like Vishwa Hindu Parishad, Jamaat-e-Islami had threatened secularism and its institutional form, the state. As such, the graver social and economic issues were being sidelined by the growing communalism in society. Failure of economy and development. Kothari attacked the insidious networks of middlemen who, under the guise of promoting planned economic development, were siphoning off public assets, corrupting the production process and spurned any attempts to hold them accountable. Most development schemes alienated the masses and favored the dominant elite. The state's role as a mediator was also being chipped away. The rise of this criminal illicit economy enhanced the gaps in the state's role and increased strife and uncertainty in society. The state, D.L. Sheth argues, having failed to respond to the economic demands of the marginalized, resorted to divisionary tactics like ethnicizing or communalizing economic issues. Also, the mixed economy comprising of the public sector and the private sector had already delivered any employment opportunities and had instead impinged upon the existing resources. As for the agricultural and forest economy, they had been ravaged by pro-business interests, leading to the loss of traditional livelihood of the impoverished masses. In addition, populist economics by the Planning Commission, like Garibi Hatao, was merely harping on removing poverty without dealing with any of its real structural root causes. Rise of capitalism. Kothari also identifies certain international factors. The bolstering of capitalist system armed with technology and weapons had posed a serious problematic. On the one hand, it plied the latter with capital, technology and weapons to shelter the middle class from the problems that the poor masses suffer from, and on the other hand, it extorted raw materials, natural resources and manufactured consumer goods from the third world and regulates the working class, a condition of the IMF and World Bank structural adjustment policies. In an insecure environment where development had only ended up dividing the society, favoring the elite and neglecting the masses, democracy had been besieged by ills like corruption and criminalization. The masses had no access to either a functional economy or a political sphere. According to Kothari, democratic politics had suffered a massive setback. The Parliament, the Planning Commission and the Executive had failed to deal with demands of the masses and function properly in an environment of aggression. Politicians were easily being replaced by technocracy, and masses were asked to withdraw from the political processes, supposedly in the best interest. Moreover, a formal democratic polity based on a foundation of inequality had oppressed and inflicted humiliation on the people. As such, people had become dejected with the string of political parties that have occupied power at the center. In addition, Sudipta Kaviraj wryly comments that politicians do not seem to have much choice among the current policies. Hence, instead of minimizing the fallout of the structural crisis, they end up intensifying it. Crisis of theory. Kothari is also critical of theory and argues that its deficit was partly responsible for the breakdown of the system. He attacks the liberal theory for wrongly conceptualizing the market as the mediator of interest. The social democratic theory's notion of a generous welfare state too fell apart, since growth rates were minimal and there was hardly any surplus left with the state. The radical Marxist theory also did not work in a society which lacked considerable proportion of working class, where the village economy was in a state of decay, where technology did not provide jobs, where the poor were embroiled in a vicious cycle of marginalization and violence, and where the local polarizations did not actualize at the national and global levels. Kothari argues that these theoretical conceptualizations proposed in an altogether different context do not find any resonance within the local society. Even theories of participation falter. He laments that the production of knowledge is suffering in the country, since the social sciences are suffering a serious crunch of ideology, while the science and technology centers have not produced any innovative ideas, thus striking a blow to the country's claims of autonomy and self-sufficiency. Failure of left parties. People were disillusioned with the work of the opposition, like trade unions, peasant organizations, opposing political parties and left-wing intellectuals. For instance, trade unions ended up instigating bargains within the working class and ignoring workers in the unorganized sector. Radical left parties, which had earlier posed a serious challenge to feudalism and colonialism, too have failed to deliver. They were not able to reach out to the marginalized, impoverished masses who have been subjugated by the state and other private vested interests. In fact, positioning themselves as the revolutionary vanguards, the left could not see them as unamenable to political mobilization and believed that their votes would be aggregated fruitfully. The disillusionment with the conventional macro organizations, not just the left, as also because they are structured in an inflexible hierarchical manner. Also, they were limited in their approach to change, envisioning it was only in one sphere, either economic, social or cultural, and hence fails to articulate a broad spectrum of issues affecting the marginalized section of society. declining political discourse. In addition, DL Seth argues that the political discourse in Parliament had deteriorated, devolving into merely legal positions of the executives and supported by courts instead of stemming from an engagement with democratic politics. There was therefore a serious void intellectually, politically, ethically in the country. The rise of the non-party political fronts and grassroots alternatives. Despite such a disappointing scenario, it is heartening to see that people have not been alienated completely from political processes. People are becoming increasingly conscious about their rights and are conveying the discontent against the state and the privileged elite. Kothari states that the failure of all these elements had spawned the formation of non-party political front, also known as grassroots movements. Non-party political fronts are counter-hegemonic and began to mushroom from 1980s onwards, although DL Seth traces their origin even before the 1970s. Political consciousness and action are now being galvanized in completely different and novel ways. These organizations, though outside the party system and the government, are not alienated from the democratic struggle, but in fact are part of it. They strive to widen the ambit of the politics, which had so far been limited to the legislative and electoral process. Shetty mentions that there is a marked shift away from the patron-client relationship traditionally harbored by political parties. Moreover, the hitherto unrecognized issues in politics have now become an integral part of it, such as women's rights, forest rights, health and nutrition, education, tribal rights, anti-dam movements, and so on. For instance, Navnirman movement in Bihar, Chipko movement, Self-Employed Movement Association in Gujarat, Domestic Workers Association in Pune, Manushi Forum for Citizens' Right, Rayat Kuli Sangam, Andhra Pradesh, the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha, the Bodh Gaya movement, the Chhattisgarh Miners Agitation, Narmada Bachao Andolan, farmers' demonstration in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Maharashtra, textile strikes in Mumbai, women's movement, movement for caste equality, and so on. DL Seth states that the anti-globalization protests during the 1990s have further unified these groups at the provincial and national level. Explaining the kind of issues that were taken up by these movements, political commentator Aditya Nigam states that the farmers' movements like the Rayat Kuli Sangam began in early 1970s, demanding remunerative prices for agricultural produce, cheaper input costs, especially electricity rates, and against imposition of new water taxes. The Dalit Panther movement, on the other hand, was a powerful cultural critique of the dominance of the upper caste. Harsh Sethi also gives instance of groups like Shramik Sangatna Dhulia and Bhumi Sena. They sit with the Tarun Mandal and Mahila Mandals and regularly review and ratify the decisions taken by the latter. Another example is Chhattisgarh Mazdoor Shramik Sangh, which works on issues of children education, healthcare, and against alcoholism. Bihar Colliery Kamgar Union works on tribal rights, deforestation, besides wages and bonus. Nigam has further identified a new wave of non-party movements such as anti-communalism struggles, struggles for enhancing democratic accountability, anti-nuclear arms campaign, the homosexual rights movement, the free speech and anti-censorship movements. Protection of civil liberties was one of the issues. People's Union for Civil Liberties and Democratic Rights, formed in 1976, critically questioned the violation of civil liberties by the state, especially during the imposition of emergency. Post-independence, it took on a supervisory role with regard to the state demanding the release of political prisoners and also campaigned for the abolition of death penalty. It has now widened its definition of violated civil liberties to include those caused by caste and communal violence. Another issue taken by the non-party political groups is of the communal violence. For instance, the Nagarik Ekta Manch grew as a response to the 1984 anti-Sikh riots. Samprayada Ekta Virodhi Abhiyan, Hyderabad Ekta, the People's Movement for Secularism, Aman Ekta Manch, and Combat Communalism are several organizations working to counter the communal violence in society, conducting peace marches, running relief camps for survivors of riots, distribution of relief material, keeping a tab on media reports following court proceedings, offering legal aid to survivors, and executed educational programs to raise awareness. Nigam states that the urban development has also been focused upon by organizations, particularly issues of contestation over urban space. Delhi Janwadi Adhikar Manch formed to protest against the Supreme Court's contentious decision to shut down a number of industrial units in Delhi. It linked and raised issues of urban planning, environmental degradation, and workers' rights. The other campaign on rights on the urban poor and zoning was carried out by an alliance between locality-based association Shahjahan Manch. Its members undertook surveys and collected data about the facilities like water and electricity in settlements, colonies where the laboring class resides. The question of political accountability has also been raised by these groups. Vivek Ram Kumar cites the example of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangatna, which is an organization run by peasants and farmers. It had earlier run a successful campaign for right to information, which demanded access to the government account records on entitlements. It demanded a platform for people to enable them to participate in governance and to hold the state responsible to the people. During the state assembly elections in 2003, it had tried to amend the voter registration process to raise awareness about the candidates vying for electoral office and to ensure that the code of conduct is followed to weed out any faulty candidates. The other campaign undertaken by it are Right to Work campaign and Jan Niti Abhiyan. The women's movement has been actively waging autonomous non-party campaigns since 1977. They were disappointed with the tendency of other parties to be dominated by men and their patronizing attitudes towards women's issues. The left was criticized for its exclusive focus on class consciousness. The left was criticized for its exclusive focus on class issue as well as its neglect of patriarchy and domestic violence perpetrated by the working class men. Some women's groups gradually broke away with the parties and waged independent campaigns. Multiple women's centers like Sakhi Kendra and Saheli sprung up in cities, imparting legal health care, counseling, and even employment. They often held workshops to celebrate women's creativity through songs, drama, paintings, thereby spawning a new definition of political activism. In addition, Nigam highlights the peace movement, which grew out of the anti-nuclear arms campaigns, particularly against the detonating of the nuclear weapon by India in May 1998. He cautions that it should not be confused with the communist-led movements like the All India Peace and Solidarity Organization during the Cold War period. The peace movement is autonomous. Organizations like Anumukti, Parmanu Bam Virodhi Andolan, and the Movement in India for Nuclear Disarmament has struggled against nuclear energy. Eventually, All India Coalition for Nuclear Disarmament and Peace evolved a campaign against the Iraq war waged by the US. Fairly recently, the alternative sexualities movement has surfaced on the horizon, with several LGBT rights groups like NAZ challenging the stigmatization of the homosexual and sex workers community by the government. Particularly the imposition of Article 377, they protested vigorously against the assault of the fundamentalist forces on the screening of Deepa Mehta's film Fire, portraying lesbian relations. Kothari states that these movements are unique since they do not just include political and economic demands but also include ecological, educational, and cultural concerns. These organizations have donned new roles since they have given up traditional roles of political parties depending on charismatic appeals and have identified issues that are not just created locally and nationally but also stem from international factors. He adds that these movements are not targeting a single enemy but are targeting a larger ills like alcoholism, unhygienic habits, etc., which is akin to Swarajya struggle against the internal decay. These associations are not the same as voluntary welfare and philanthropic groups working on development program. The non-party political front groups have ushered in an era of participatory democracy. D.L. Sheth argues that presently democratic theory perceives participation as legal constitutional rights of citizens and political duties. Participation is limited to electoral institutions and liberal representatives. Democracy is believed to be the peak of political state. He cites Fukuyama, who believed that the end of history is signaled by the spread of liberal democracy across the world. These theories could justify just a claim by asserting that the history of democracy is linear and grew progressively complex from the Athenian participatory democracy to the present representative democracy, constantly improving to handle larger issues affecting the people. Any sign to revive participatory democracy is seen as a degenerative move. In India, the notion of the village republic was dismissed on similar grounds. Secondly, these theories promote the idea that participatory democracy is simple. And populist. According to them, political decision making is too complicated and the technical for ordinary people to engage in and must be left to the expertise and knowledge of the specialists. The dominant elite in India has endorsed this view, calling for the limitation of elected representatives' power, otherwise majoritarian discussions will be taken which will do more harm than good. The non-party political groups have challenged these flawed theories, although their critique is not grounded in theory but springs from the experiences of concrete political struggles. These groups have evolved new strategies for inviting participation, such as participatory surveys and studies, as well as padayatras, conscious raising marches. For instance, in 1991, Manya Prante Chaitanya Yatra Padayatra organized to agitate against the state's decision to permit bauxite mining in tribal populated Vishaka, Andhra Pradesh. Another example is of Manushi Forum for Citizens' Rights, which aims to protect economic rights of street hawkers and rickshaw pullers. It conducted documentary screenings and public hearings are held to highlight the corrupt practices of local police who bother them with the fallouts of pro-rich economic reforms. A third example is the movement led by Mohan Hirabai Hiralal to empower Gram Sabhas or village assemblies to enable people to participate in the village's decision-making process. Kothari claims that they are attempting to forge new ties with the global political movements spearheaded against imperialist forces by non-state actors, not limited to any particular territory. This is significant insofar the global issues have not been touched by ruling political parties, satiated with the global status quo, and not even by the radical left except for few passing references to them. Sometimes the movements of non-party political front may culminate in the formation of organized formal parties. For instance, the regional political parties that were born out of movements for regional autonomy in Assam, Jharkhand, Karnataka, where centralized rule was challenged and decentralization was demanded. These satellite centers, whose resources have long been extorted by the center, now demanded their rights to preserve the language, culture and environment, as well as demand jobs. A specific example would be the demand during 1990s for recognizing a separate Uttarakhand state, carved out of the hill regions of Uttar Pradesh. The Uttarakhand Kranti Dal asserted a distinct identity, culture and language of the Garhwali and Kumaon people. There also have been movements for cultural and linguistic autonomy. For instance, Nigam mentions the Assam movement during the 1980s, which rose out of the concerted efforts of the Assamese literary personalities to challenge the hegemony of the Bengali culture. Nigam adds that the groups also realize the importance of deepening their impact on the formal political processes. Hence, they field local candidates in elections to try to establish an alternate agenda. For example, during the 10th Lok Sabha elections, Groups like All Jharkhand Students Union, Naga People's Movement for Human Rights, Bhopal Gas Pidit Mahila Udyog Sangathan, Jan Vikas Andolan, Nirman Mazdoor Panchayat Sangam, etc. came together to put up the People's Manifesto in 1991, an amalgamation of all their core issues into effect. Although this effort did not bear fruit, it did boost further efforts for such movements to participate directly in elections. The next attempt was in 2004 elections, when there was an attempt to form a movement party. Harsh Sethi states that the non-party political fronts are concerned with articulating the voices of the masses. He claims that this tendency can be traced not only to the Gandhian heritage but also stems from a response to the left's ignorance of the political potentiality of the non-industrial working classes. At the same time, the groups are not oblivious to the diversity within the community, unlike the left's perception of a homogeneous working class. The left fails to realize that India particularly is such a fragmented intersectional society that one cannot clearly identify a single category like class or caste or linguistic identity or citizen. These groups face a similar dilemma, but they still strive to organize and mobilize different communities depending on the issues that the latter hold crucial to them. The other quandary faced by the non-party political fronts is the question of organizational structure. Since these groups are distrustful of the left and other formal political parties, proclivity to an authoritarian, hierarchical, non-participatory, undemocratic structure, they have opted for loose organizational structures. Critique. Rajni Kothari and Harsh Sethi outline the criticism levied against non-party political fronts. They are feeble, disjointed and have very few resources. Secondly, they are not seen as ushering in any change into the overall political system and are only seen as the first step to the left parties' capture of political power. These groups may denigrate into narrow localisms, anti-revolutionary and diversionary tendencies. Thirdly, they are limited to the local level and have not led to the national or international mobilizations. Fourthly, their organizational structures, being loose, are often ineffective. Fifthly, these groups are unable to deal with issues that go beyond their limited local capacities. Moreover, since they are diminutive in size, they are not very stable and are frequently plagued by financial issues. Their organizational democracy does not last for long, and in cases of change in leadership, they are not able to survive. Harsh Sethi also cautions against a serious tendency of these groups to set up absolute objectives. The desire to usher in an egalitarian, exploitation-free, non-scarcity society using democratic, open-ended and participatory means without reference to the socio-historical context in which the attempt is being made. Kothari responds to these criticisms by arguing that contrary to the commonsensical notions, these groups have not sprung out of immediate causes. They in fact have a significant part to play today and have definitely opened up a novel alternative space for expressing dissent. Only by operating outside the extant political structure, these groups are effecting a change, unlike the former revolutionary parties who were only focused on replacing the ruling class. Demonstrating a novel, deeper understanding of history, they do not strive for simply capturing state power and representative institution. They are also not temporary phenomena but involve sustained struggle. Their contribution is in contrast to the middle class's demand for withdrawal of politics. Harsh Sethi adds that these groups work precisely because they are well acquainted with the intricacies of local situation. They are flexible, are aware of the need to empower the vulnerable masses, and are skilled at mobilization and organization, which left parties have failed to do so. He also defends the non-party political front against the charges of localism by arguing that they had undertaken three strategies to counter this. Firstly, they may join a formal political party, albeit at the risk of losing the distinctive character. The positive is that the political party may have to make its bureaucratic structure more flexible. Secondly, some of the non-party political front groups may try to form a coalition with similar groups. For instance, Jabran Jot was a federation of tribal groups in Maharashtra demanding the renewal of cultivation rights to tribal on cleared forest land, and the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha, an alliance of tribal and backward castes in Bihar, Bengal and Orissa seeking a separate state in the Indian Union. The problem is these tie-ups among the groups do not last for long due to the internal tensions. For instance, the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha's participants were at loggerheads since the backward castes and tribals had a long history of exploitative relationships. Thirdly, they remain independent but forge a working relationship with another political party. But Sethi laments such collaborations transpires only during elections as larger political party tries to take advantage of the non-party political front's popular base of followers. Thus, to conclude, we have seen in this module how important the role of the non-party political formations are. As Rajani Kothari argues, the non-party political formations engage with the state and engage with dominant ideologies, taking the stand from the subaltern perspectives. These non-party political formations do not have the kind of mandates that political parties have, and therefore they are able to work in a much better fashion than political parties. They do not work under the kinds of pressure that electoral politics demands. Thank you.